Good morning. How's everyone doing this week? I hope it's been a good week for you all. I know for us it's been a pretty busy week getting back in the swing of things. One of my kids started back to school today, thankfully, and so we're just rolling, but thankfully made it to Friday. So for my discussion video this week, I chose to talk about Jane McCrea. I did some research on her and just realized that what made her famous is how she was murdered while on her way to go meet with her fiance, who was believed to be a lieutenant in the British military. So she was a loyalist, supposedly, with her family, and so she was on her way to go visit. And along the way, she was confronted by two Native American men who proceeded to beat her and eventually murdered her, and they scalped her as well. So she was murdered by this group, and being a loyalist, a lot of people were appalled by it and they were shocked by it, and they pleaded with the British officials in the region to do something about it. And unfortunately, the Lieutenant General John Burgoyne, he didn't do anything about it. There was no justice, there was no arrest, no demand for accountability, and a lot of people, especially the loyalists, were upset. So the colonists, and keep in mind this occurred in 1777 when she was murdered, so the war was going on, and the political leaders and the military leaders of the revolution, they seized on the opportunity to essentially make her a martyr for the colonies. They created propaganda. They talked about how the British wouldn't be able to protect them, and how essentially they were on their own, and that they needed to side with the colonists in order to sway those that were kind of on the border and those that were loyalist as well to the crown. And surprisingly, it worked. I mean, propaganda, it works. Whether it's for military, political gain, people always respond in kind to this sort of act. So for the colonists, they saw a massive spike in militia enlistments in places like New York and Vermont. And essentially what this did was it gave them the numbers that when it came time for the Battle of Saratoga, as we know as the turning point for the revolution in the northern colonies, it gave them the numbers to essentially win that battle over the British, just winning by sheer force and sheer numbers, and the British were essentially able to keep up in that. They were unable to, excuse me. So a story like this is always going to inspire a nation. And to me, it's really interesting that it occurred so close to the Battle of Saratoga, this turning point, that Jane McCrea is known as dying for her country. And even though she was a loyalist first and a colonist second, really, so I just found it interesting that they were able to use her death as propaganda. And so we kind of hear about this now, and it's taught to us, and we're really surprised that something like this would take place. And the fact that the British didn't do anything about it is what she's known for. It's what made her a legend, a martyr. Martyrs always go down in history, usually in a good way too. It always has beneficial effects for the party that is attempting to martyr the individual. She may have been a loyalist, but her death at the hands of the Native Americans and the inability of the British to jump into action made her out to be a martyr for the American cause, and her death would serve as the catalyst that the Americans needed for the cause of the military and for the cause of politicians working to hold things together at the time. So, although we might not necessarily hear that her death is what helped us win the Battle of Saratoga, I think a lot of what we hear is that the American will and American might in the Battle of Saratoga, and the unwillingness to give up and the willingness to endure and persevere is kind of the narrative that we get, but we don't really think about what other factors may have gone into play in history and kind of what were some of the build-up moments that led to this eventual victory and this turning point on the road to revolution and the road to independence. So that's where I went with this week, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it made sense, and I look forward to hearing your comments. Thank you guys so much.